strangulation of a little 9-month-old, barehanded by Gazan civilians, killed these kids in cold blood, returned their bodies. The Hamas used it as a parade. It was celebrated. Where were the foreign affairs people? Where is Melanie Joly now after repeating Hamas talking points about the fake bombing of a hospital? There was several 100,000 people in Buenos Aires the same day that we had militant Islamist supporters shouting murderous slogans against Jewish people in downtown Montreal and Toronto. What has happened to Canada? In our press, the fifth estate, their job is to say, we've reached a point of moral blindness or darkness as a country that must be addressed. Everybody that went to that Hasbulla funeral in Lebanon, every single person that flies back in from Canada should be detained, and if they have anything related to not being a full citizen born here, deported, go live there. But I remember the CBC did a very high production, sort of Willy Wonka mockery of the Freedom Convoy, and I was disgusted by it. Outside of Canada, even the president was compelled to say that what Christian Freeland did with the truckers was fascism.
Back to the media, though, because I just don't understand. From my perspective, no one's watching it and they're tuned out, specifically in the Gen Z and the millennial generation. People didn't watch the legacy media. So how is it that they can have such an outsized influence still in our country, that they could cause such a drastic swing in just a few weeks?
Well, I think there's a couple things going on. I think the media, people still pull their information increasingly from social media and different sources, right? But there's when you use people's tax dollars to fund an ideological position, that I saw this one CBC. I've thought about posting about this in light of what Pascal Saint-Onge said, but I remember the CBC did a very high production, sort of Willy Wonka mockery of the Freedom Convoy, and I was disgusted by it. Outside of Canada, even the president was compelled to say that what Christian Freeland did with the truckers was fascism, right? This is language that, people in Europe found it bizarre, and it's extraordinary that a state-owned broadcaster not only doesn't say, let's have a question about civil rights and a decision that was found to be deeply unconstitutional, total violation of the law, right? And instead, we're going to create a musical mockery of people whose intention was to confront the anti-scientific basis of a bunch of COVID mandates federally that were soon dropped because they were totally out of line with what was going on everywhere else in the world. And we're out of line with what was health best practice. And we're killing the business of these truckers. These guys were debanked. Terror laws were invoked against Canadians. We were told it was foreign interference. It was almost all Canadians backing these people. And one sort of, news business of record that is supposed to serve Canadians is entirely not just failing to defend the idea that there's something important here that needs to be debated in terms of civil rights, dissent, these decisions and how this was handled. Beyond that, they're openly mocking it, sending this sort of like wink and nod, like, aren't these people clowns? Aren't they dumb? Aren't they uneducated? Aren't they sad? It was so disgusting. It was so Pravda. And now we're dealing with a bunch of, second tier, politicians who are using old Soviet terms like misinformation and disinformation. And they're using them with a straight face against Canadians that want to have an open debate about this kind of society they want to live in and they want to inherit. So I think that there's a lot to play for right now. I think this is partly why the media is so desperate to portray Pierre as a Trump wannabe or a Trump supporter. I think it's painted the Conservative Party into a corner in terms of the kind of messaging that you have to use. On the one hand, you've got to say the people that are presenting themselves as defending Canada are actually the problem, because for 9 years they've created a weaker, less resilient economy, a joke of the military, and they've undermined Canadians. We've got the worst productivity. We've got, they want to do dollar for dollar tariffs, and it costs $1.43 to do a dollar for dollar tariff. This is what we're up against. How the narrative, if it gets adopted wholesale by a media that doesn't want to be critical of the government, ends up bending people's sentiment and creating sort of, this idea of the Overton window. where, you know, there's sort of a framing of ideas where certain ideas become acceptable only when a crisis kind of opens that window up. I don't think Canadians have yet seen how disastrous what's happened to the economy and our security has been, but I think they're starting to see it. I think people are more and more frustrated at the extremism that they see in our streets. The Bibas family in Israel, the strangulation of a little 9-month-old, barehanded by Gazan civilians, killed these kids in cold blood, returned their bodies. The Hamas used it as a parade. It was celebrated. Where
Yeah,
were the foreign affairs people? Where is Melanie Joly now after repeating Hamas talking points about the fake bombing of a hospital? Like, where is Canada right now? There was several 100,000 people in Buenos Aires the same day that we had militant Islamist supporters shouting murderous slogans against Jewish people in downtown Montreal and Toronto. What has happened to Canada? And our press, the fifth estate, their job is to say, we've reached a point of moral blindness or darkness as a country that must be addressed. The sickness and depravity of the things being said on our streets by people sponsored by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which we only named a terrorist entity in June of this year, by the way. We still have 600 of those guys trolling our streets, and they're all using our asylum laws to try and stay in Canada, and they're sponsoring things like Samadoun. Everybody that went to that Hasbulla funeral in Lebanon, every single person that flies back in from Canada should be detained, and if they have anything related to not being a full citizen born here, deported. Go live there. Go live under Hamas and Hezbollah. But stay off the streets and quit turning us into this anti-Semitic extremist culture. And our press is letting us down. Our law enforcement is letting us down. And our politicians are letting us down. And this is not conservative liberal. This is the kind of society we want to live in. Most of my Jewish friends have actually traditionally voted liberal. And we have huge debates over that, right? Because I think that's crazy. But what's happening, it doesn't have to be liberal conservative. We need a society that has a vision for what it can do and be. And you see complete hollowness and silence in a moment where Hamas has jumped the shark. Like, if it was even possible to think they were more depraved than we already thought they were. But we have terror laws for this reason.
right.
I promise you this, if there was a right-wing funeral and we had a bunch of thugs with tats flying up to that and coming back, you bet they'd be detained, right?
Yeah, I
There's
completely
this
agree.
weird, again, this very weird progressive left instinct that wants to play softly. And again, I think we do this at our peril, but we need to get our cities and our streets back, and we need to end this fraud that's being abetted by terror and criminal syndicates.